Let the beauty we love be what we do. There are hundreds of ways to kneel and kiss the ground.
Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field.
I'll meet you there.
When the soul lies down in that grass, the world is too full to talk about. Ideas, language, even the phrase each other doesn't make any sense.
Don't go back to sleep.
The breeze at dawn has secrets to tell you.
Don't go back to sleep.
You must ask for what you really want.
People are going back and forth across that door sill where the two worlds meet. Don't go back to sleep.
That door, it's round and open, and I would love to kiss you.
The price of kissing is your life.
Now my loving is running toward my life, shouting.
What a bargain. Let's buy it.
Daylight, full of small dancing particles, and the one great turning. Our souls are dancing with you. Without feet, they dance. Can you see them when I whisper in your ear?
In the body of the world, they say, there is a soul. In the body of the world, there is a soul, and you are that.
But we have ways within each other that will never be said by anyone.
They will never, never be said by anyone.
We have ways within each other that will never be said. These beautiful, evocative words from Rumi, they're signposts for us, helpful signposts along the way, signposts towards the field of fuller being, which exists beyond our ideas and our words, a field where our gestures, our language, and even the sense of each other here no longer matter, a field of experience which we sometimes find ourselves naturally in. Through our experiences of open-heartedness, our experiences of natural intimacy, both within ourselves and between each other at times, for moments, and of course in varying degrees. And in the rough and tumble of everyday life, it may be helpful to think of this way of adab of ours like that too. To think of adab as a way, a road with signposts on it, signposts for ways of being in the world with each other, such as the practices of sincerity, of kindness and humility, of non-judgment, the cultivation of a generosity of spirit with each other, with ourselves, in our everyday situations. Intentional practices of Adab which point like signposts towards that field of inner and outer openness and intimacy, the field which is always there, always here, always available when it is reached for, when it's remembered. And I can see that it feels really important for us to keep these ways of Adab and what they are pointing to alive for each other in the everyday present moment of all of our interactions. To avoid the notion of Adab becoming a word that is used only to refer perhaps to the conventions of being together, like the empty and perennial elbows off the table of childhood at supper time, a rule, a convention to be kept without a full understanding of its value or meaning. No, let's rather aim to remember the aliveness and the possibilities of our ways of Adab, so that we know what we're doing when we practice these ways that favor harmony, that favor non-judgment, politeness, sure, kindness, humility, all of which set the tone, and we understand that they set the tone for a deeper way of being together, a way of perhaps finding and connecting with our innermost field of being, with our open hearts. Okay, so these signposts sound familiar, but here's the question, why? Why don't we always remember to cultivate these ways within ourselves and with each other? Not so much the social conventions, although of course these help. But why don't we always remember to reach for the sincere gestures of Adab that point this way to the openness with each other, which, when it arises, we find so beautiful? Why are these ways forgotten in our busy, confused, disconnected fields of everyday life? And what is your fear? What is my fear of openness and of intimacy about? And what makes reciprocal vulnerability, the reciprocal vulnerability of openness and intimacy, available between us? How can we act as reminders for each other of the field of the heart and being beyond words where we already coexist? How can we act as reminders with our gestures of sincere and open listening, of soft gazing at each other, of humility, of patience, service, care? And of course, our self-care in these practices and in this work has to allow for the fact that however much the adab of the situation is offering us the possibility of real openness, we will always find different degrees, different qualities of this experience within us, between us, depending upon who we are, how much openness is available to us right now, where we're centered in ourselves, what the whole situation is at any particular moment. We need to allow for that too, to be kind to ourselves. So let's start to get ready to break out into small groups to think about this. In your breakout triads, in a few minutes, you're invited to simply reflect upon an important, meaningful experience of openness or of intimacy of any kind that you have had. Take it in turns to simply share with each other what the qualities of your experience were. How did you recognize that you were in the field? What led you into this experience of intimacy? What made it available to you? What made it possible? You will have 20 minutes now in your breakouts, and remember to keep an eye on your own timer so you can see where you are in the 20 minutes, because we won't be reminding you of that this time. Thank you. See you in about 20 minutes.
Take just a moment to gather yourself. Take a breath, stretch a little bit, gently move just a little. Another breath, perhaps. Let your breathing settle you in, finding a comfortable place where you can be as we enter a more contemplative space, where the spaces between the words may be as important as the words themselves. Now let your eyes close. Be at ease. And come along with me now as we approach the field. Come to the field, he says. I will meet you there, she promises. Where is this field? Just there. Just beyond. No. No, the field is right here. The field is right now. This field of intimacy. This is the life we live. Intimacy is an ever-present field where the giver, the gift, and the giving are discovered within the everyday experiences offered up to us through the life we live, with awareness, with attention, with sincerity. What is more intimate than the next breath you take? If you allow your awareness to rest with that breath, you may remember that you are sharing that very breath with all living creatures, indeed, with the very earth itself. Perhaps, perhaps you are even breathing a little bit of some long ago stardust. What is more intimate than the next opportunity to acknowledge with your attention, your caring awareness, whoever you may be with, a lover, a friend, a family member, a stranger you pass on the street, the cashier in the market. What do you offer of yourself in that meeting? How may you be present in that moment? Do you see them? Do they see you? Are you listening to one another? In the simplest of ways, do you acknowledge that you are there sharing this time? Do you see one another's needs? Can you be of help when it is needed? Strolling through a sweet, quiet woods, you stop before one of the so many trees in this place. You reach out. You reach out and rest your hand upon the trunk. And for a moment, for that moment, feel the little seedling that among so many was the one that took root here, growing and expanding into the world. It became through the gift of the sun and the earth. And now, for so many years, it shares its breath with you. Another time, as you walk along, you reach down and pick up a stone. It is plain, hefty, not quite smooth. You imagine all it has taken to transform the mountainous, powerful entity this stone must have been eons ago into this your hand can hold. The story of this stone is the story of an unimaginable time you can honor if you allow yourself to be present in its memory. You, you pick up a book that means much to you. You value this book, you keep it nearby. The words written there, the stories told, all have touched you so deeply. It is old now, a bit frayed at the edges. There are many pages with a corner folded back so as to be found more easily. Perhaps this book is a book from Rumi. We heard the words of Rumi's A Great Wagon. Rumi, from the 13th century. The 13th century, his words reach out to us on these pages, touching us so intimately, it is as if he is here. Consider then that this wisdom does not begin with Rumi, but extends from a time, can we say, before history, to and through him, and now to you and me. Now we see our breath of stardust and the deepening roots of the breathing forest, and the generosity of the mountain gifting us this stone, and wise words flowing to us across immeasurable time. All this life has given. And with this giving, the intimate relationship all life shares is evident. This is the natural intimacy resting within us and all around us at the same time. This is the field where we meet.
Thank you, Isha. So you may have the question at this moment, what does this have to do with Adab? How does intimacy relate to Adab? Is there an intimacy Adab? Is there an Adab of intimacy? To engage these questions, we have to step back to a larger view, remind ourselves why we're here, what we're doing, what this program is about, the way of Adab. And simply to reframe our space here, we're offering in this program an opportunity and a challenge, an opportunity to explore a couple of propositions. One is that reality is relational. That apart from whatever we think reality is, or how we would answer the question, what is reality from a metaphysical or a philosophical or a spiritual or a scientific point of view, the actual reality that we're living moment by moment every day, we could say that that reality is being generated through our interaction, through the way we interact with others, with ourselves, with the situations we're in, with the world we're in, with the environment, that the fabric of our everyday experience is being woven through every moment that we are in relationship, which is to say, every moment that we're alive, because we're always in some form of relating. Even breathing is a form, obviously, of relationship. So this proposition is that reality is relational, and it follows from that the second proposition, which is there is an alchemy of transformation possible and available to us through this realization that the reality that I'm living moment to moment every day is being generated. It's not being given to me. I'm not the victim of my reality. It's being generated through the way I respond or don't respond to a particular situation. That alchemy, we're suggesting, becomes available through the way of Adab. And this way of Adab is simply paying attention to how we relate, again, to others, to ourselves, to the world, how we relate. And in paying attention to our relatedness, seeking to the best of our ability every day, moment by moment, to refine our responsiveness in all the various relational fields that we exist in. That is the way of Adab, the refinement of responsiveness. Calling it the refinement of responsiveness suggests that there isn't an endpoint. There is a continual process of refining how we relate. This is the way of Adab. And so, what does intimacy have to do with this? What's intimacy got to do with it? From a certain point of view, we could say that at the heart of what we are doing together, not just those of us in the Sufi Way open path community, but all of the people on earth at this moment who are seeking to live a deeper reality, a more substantial, essential truth. You know, this thing that has been called for centuries enlightenment, which now in the 21st century is often referred to as realization, self-realization, this thing itself that we're pursuing, even though it's hard to name it or define it, that it is in itself a form of intimacy. It's a form of intimacy with this, with what is happening, with what is in play, and not just with what is happening in the moment, but where it's coming from. So we could say that we're seeking intimacy with source, with the source of our lives, the source of our beings, the source of all life, the source of love, harmony, and beauty. So that we're longing for intimacy with source. I'm using the word source as a kind of a general term to try to catch all of the different ways that we might characterize for ourselves what it is that we're seeking to be intimate with. So, for example, within Sufism, and I'm speaking here of classical Sufism, Sufism, as you all probably know, has evolved a great deal, especially in the last 100 years, with the inspiration of Inayat Khan, who made Sufism a much more open, inclusive way of being. But in classical Sufism, the intimacy that we're seeking was very clear. It was intimacy with Allah, intimacy with God. And Sufis, classical Sufis in particular, have a term for this. They call it nearness, nearness. And this is based on a hadith of Muhammad, peace be upon him, who said, God is nearer to you than your jugular vein. God is closer than your jugular vein. This nearness is a current within the Sufi traditions for centuries and centuries. And it is picked up in our contemporary universal, as we're calling it, universal Sufism, for example, in the work of Pir Elias. One of his flashes, he has this wonderful phrase, God is nearer to you than the moisture on your tongue. Wonderful, wonderful image. God is nearer to you than the moisture on your tongue. So within the framework of classical Sufism, intimacy is what it's all about. It's becoming so intimate with Allah that ultimately there is only one. That the ultimate flower of that intimacy is what the Sufis call wadat al-wujud, the unity of being, an existence in which I'm still this person, but having entered into this intimacy, this person is no longer defined just by this name and this timeline. That intimacy is clearly one of the objectives within the classical Sufism framework. In the work of the Sufi way, as expressed and guided by Pir Elias, this idea of intimacy with Source is opened up. So we often see, for example, in the open path work, that Pir Elias is encouraging us to find intimacy with awareness, to be in a state of union with this awareness that is not just our particularized awareness, but is what we might call pure awareness. That is another form of intimacy, to be so intimate with awareness that the distinction between your personal awareness and pure awareness is softened to a great extent. So what are the characteristics of this kind of intimacy? Intimacy with Allah, intimacy with the divine, intimacy with the universe, intimacy with nature, intimacy with awareness. Well, we could think of it as unscripted, spacious vulnerability, accessibility, openness, a nearness so close that it cannot be measured. Again, thinking about one of Elias's flashes, he asks us to answer the question, how far away from the tree is a leaf that is on the farthest twig of the farthest branch from the trunk? How far away is that leaf from the tree? A profoundly present, yielding openness, profoundly present. I'm not leaving anything away. Everything is right here. Surrendered, open. When we start to think about intimacy in this way, we come to another way to characterize intimacy with Source. Certainly my own predilection is to think of it as intimacy with the beloved. The beloved is a way for our minds and our imaginations to grasp the divine. But rather than an abstract divine force, life, whatever it is out there, to begin to imagine it as a beloved, as a true beloved, someone that you're having a real, ongoing, intimate, profoundly important, and completely loving relationship. To the extent that we can generate within our imaginations and within our hearts a sense of the presence of the beloved, we can enter into a dance of intimacy with that beloved. See, in this framework, God is not an abstraction, an all-powerful singular consciousness that has created us. In this characterization of intimacy with Source, the beloved is the beloved. And we've mentioned a number of times today reciprocal vulnerability, two lovers being reciprocally vulnerable to one another. It's a wonderful contemplation to consider. What does it mean to be in a state of reciprocal vulnerability with the beloved? Again, this is the way of Adab. Through the way of Adab, we may be able to begin to experience this wonderful give and take where God herself is actually saying to you, well, what do you want to do? What is it you need? How can I help you? Certainly in Sufism, it is a well-known saying, a well-known established instruction in effect. When you call upon God, God calls upon you. When you remember God, God remembers you. However it is that you want to construe this word, God, and please remember, and those of you who don't know me, will certainly need, it'll be helpful to make this clear. I'm talking about intimacy with God with the full awareness that there is no God. But God. There is no God. Stop looking. But God. Well, all of these fancy words might be interesting, maybe even inspiring to some of you, God willing. But at the end of the day, the question is still, what does this have to do with Adab? How do I do this? What is this about? What are we being guided to here? Well, the way of Adab, as we've been presenting it, can certainly sound like an aspiration, something that is resident in the imaginal, not in our real lives. But this is a crucially important point, is that the way of Adab invites us to join reality at the point where it is both human and beyond human. How do we do this? Well, one of the difficulties here is that I don't know about you, but if you ask me, how do I go about being intimate? I don't know that question can be answered. Don't know that intimacy is something I can do. It's not something I can perform. It's a quality of presence more than an action. So if intimacy is a quality of presence more than an action, how do I do it? What do I do? How do I deepen this possibility of intimacy with Source? Well, there are very practical ways, and I would like in the next few moments to share 3 of them with you and to invite us to practice very briefly each of these exercises. They are called the gestures of intimacy, and you'll find more information about them on the webpage in the Living Sufism site. The gestures of intimacy are just that. They're ways of sitting, ways of being, ways of opening, in the hopes that this will enable us to arrive in this quality of presence we're calling intimacy. These exercises, as they are presented on the website, and as I'm going to share them with you in a moment, are really intended to provide you a way to create a setting for intimacy, a space, a situation, a condition, a disposition, a state in which intimacy is more likely to occur. That's what they are. They are gestures that welcome intimacy. Let's work on the first one. The first one is called the release of certainty. And it may well be that one of the major obstacles to intimacy and even to connection, to sincerity, to presence, that one of the major obstacles is me, the I that we offered a chilla about last month, the chilla of abstaining from saying I, because partly that I is one of the primary obstructions to intimacy. I don't think so. I don't believe that. I want, I don't want, I need. And these are often held at such a level of conviction that we don't even question them. I am who I am. I am this way. And that certainty of who we are is built up on a whole other studio of certainties about reality, about life. This is how things are. This is what's really happening. That's untrue and this is true. And of course, we have no choice as human consciousness but to live with these kinds of, okay, I know what this is, I can stand on this, there is some firmness here. We have no choice but to accept that that's a quality of our consciousness. However, it can be very helpful to release all certainty that one can release. And that in the release of that I, of that certainty, that I that has been built up from all of these beliefs that I know are true, that in the release of that certainty, finally, one is vulnerable, one is available, completely available. So here's how we do this. I'm going to invite you to settle in your chair, put your feet flat on the ground, hands in your lap, if it's possible. And you know, the thing about sitting up straight during practice is that it opens the chest so that we can breathe with more facility. So let your breathing become relaxed. You might want to close your eyes so that you can scan your body, especially your neck, shoulders, face, hands, back, even your feet. Make sure that to the extent that it's feasible for us, that we relax. Yes, relax, breathe, relax. As your breathing is normalized, so you feel yourself breathing exactly at the rate and in the way that you should be breathing in this moment. I want you to consider with me that there is one thing we can be certain of. Let's consider the possibility that there is one thing we can be certain of, and that is that there is at this moment awareness. There is, if I may say, awaring going on. And that awaring, sorry that is such a clumsy word, but that awaring is actually centered right here and now. I'm pretty sure that I can be certain of that. Yeah, there it is. I'm aware. There's awaring going on, and it's happening from here, now. This exercise, the release of certainty, begins as you inhale, and as you inhale, locate yourself in that one and only certainty of awaring here, now. And as you exhale, let everything else, let the certainty of everything else become softer, mushy, fluid. So as we breathe in, we connect with the one thing we can be certain of. I'm aware here now. There is awareness here now. And as I breathe out, everything else gets softer. fainter, vaguer. Still there, but it's softer. Let's do this for just a couple of minutes so you get the hang of it. And I'll explain a little later how we're going to use this in the coming month. Breathe in to the singular certainty. Breathe out, soften everything else. Good. So come back to the screen. These gestures of intimacy, as we're offering them here, are, in this context, meant to be ways that you step into a spiritual practice, so that before your meditation or your repetition of a wazifa or your zikr or your singing or your moving meditation or your contemplation, you take a few moments to the best of your ability to become intimate with the source which will join you in that practice, in that meditation or contemplation. So that what this exercise is, a few minutes before you actually go into the wazifa or the meditation, you take a moment to actually release certainty, to enter into a space where intimacy through the spiritual practice becomes more feasible, more available. The second practice like this is called the breath of silence. As it sounds, it is a way of just making sure that before you enter into this practice, whatever it might be, or this experience, that you've quieted down. I can only use my own experience, which is I'll sit down to meditate and I'll realize that only my body has sat down. The rest of me is still at the desk trying to figure something out, and I brought that with me without quieting that, without silencing that. This practice is very simple. Again, feet on the ground, hands in your lap, back as straight as you can without being stiff. Let your breathing become regular, rhythmic, comfortable. So listen, if you will, to all of the sounds that you can hear right now, including my voice, but other sounds may be in your house or in the space you're in or outside beyond your windows. There are sounds. The world shows up as vibration, and vibration shows up as sound. Allow yourself to hear, to the greatest extent, everything that you can hear. And now, see if you can detect the silent background that makes all of these sounds audible. If there weren't silence in the background, you wouldn't be able to hear these sounds. These sounds stand out against that silence. Can you connect to that silence? And then with your inhalation, draw that silence toward you. So as you breathe in, you're bringing that background of silence toward you. You can still hear all of the sounds, but what you're actually paying attention to now is the silence in the background. And as you exhale, let that silence permeate every cell of your body, every fleshy and bony and nervy cell of your body. Breathe in silence, breathe out, absorbing that silence. The last gesture of intimacy we'll practice together is called remembrance. Those of you who've been around the Sufi world know that remembrance is a word that is used for the practice of not just remembering as, oh, I forgot, now I remember, but remembering as in bringing back together into a whole, making whole again, remembering what has been dismembered, we could say. The gesture of remembrance seeks to reclaim that wholeness so that when we enter into the meditation of the wazifa, or the zikr, there is a more profound availability in the experience, a more profound mutual, reciprocal availability. Now, this practice is simply, again, feet on the ground and so on. Get comfortable, feel relaxed. In this practice, as we inhale, we imagine the sphere that we are in. And it's not just the physical space, it's also the emotional, energetic, somatic, experiential field that we're in at the moment. That field, that sphere of experience is often contracted around thoughts, feelings, injuries, hopes, dreams, fears. That awareness is contracted around the, I'm trying to do this, or I hope this, or I don't want that. That sphere of awareness is in contraction. So as we breathe in, let that sphere expand. It includes your room. And as you breathe out, let yourself settle into the center of that sphere. And again, with the next breath, the sphere that you're in grows a little more. And again, as you exhale, you feel centered in that expanding field. In this way, with each breath, let your awareness, your field of not just awareness, but your field of who you are, what is happening here, to grow, to expand. Let's practice that for a couple of minutes. You inhale, the sphere expands. You exhale, center in that sphere, settle in that sphere. Good. So we just wanted to give you a taste of these three gestures of intimacy. And here's how we hope that you will use them. One, as we have shared here, the notion that before you enter into meditation, try one of these gestures to make sure that there's as much of you as possible that is entering into that spiritual practice. Seeking intimacy when you are a whole being is quite different from seeking intimacy from a limited sense of the self and its needs and wants, hopes and fears. To expand how much of ourselves, how much of this we are bringing into our spiritual practice, I believe will greatly enhance the efficacy of these practices. After all, this is what Sufism and many other traditions say. Here are the ideals, but you're not going to make much progress unless there's a discipline, a practice, a dedication to some activities that bring you there. Clearly, spiritual practice is one of those. However, there's also our daily life. And why not use these gestures of intimacy in other situations? For example, you get to a place in a relationship with a significant person in your life. It's one of these we have to talk moments. You know that there's an important conversation that needs to be had. Why not practice a gesture of intimacy before you enter into that conversation? Or in a more prosaic sort of setting, you sit down to watch the news at night, or in the morning you're checking the news sites on the internet. How about if before and as you're doing that, you practice a gesture of intimacy so that you can actually experience what it is that is happening to you in this information space, rather than reverting to the knee-jerk reactions that typically accompany, I'll speak for myself, my own review of the daily news. The news is like, oh my God, what are we going to do? Oh no, these are my reactions, not myself. And what about, you're going to have a meeting on Zoom with a few people. Why not make sure that most of you, as much as you as possible, shows up in that meeting? Or you're going out for a walk. Why not practice a gesture of intimacy before and during that walk? So these are the exercises, and this is explained a little bit more on the webpage. When we send out a reminder with the recording of this midweek, Tuesday or Wednesday, we'll have a link to these instructions so that you can be reminded about these exercises. We're hoping that you will incorporate these exercises into your daily life for the coming months so that intimacy isn't an abstraction and an ideal. It's actually something that we're doing, involved with, experiencing in our daily lives. As we offered last month, the Chilla of I, which a number of you have given us feedback, thank you, about how difficult it is, it was, it continues to be. And again, one of the aspects of the Chilla is not that you should master it, but what happens to you as you attempt to master it. The Chilla for this month also involves the I, but this I, and it's called the Chilla of Eyes. And it's very simple, but that doesn't mean it's easy. The Chilla is simply to make eye contact with every living being you encounter, to the best of your ability, to make eye contact, to sustain that contact, again, to the best of your ability, to your comfort level, with every living creature you encounter. And we're using living creature rather than with people because dogs and cats have eyes. So do birds and squirrels. The other day I stepped out in my driveway and there was a dog coming down the street, and that dog gave me the most in-your-face eye contact I've had in a long time. It was 15 yards away and it was like looking right in my eyes. Something happens in those moments. This Chilla is about discovering what that might be. So we've offered some nourishment here. I hope it has been not just informative and hopefully instructive, but ideally inspiring as well. Let us leave you with a few of the words from A Great Wagon, this wonderful poem. In many ways, Rumi is always writing about Adab. I mean, all of his poetry to me, and maybe it's just the way I'm seeing it now, it's about Adab. And in A Great Wagon, it's really about intimacy. That poem begins with these words. When I see your face, the stones start spinning. You appear and all my studying wanders. I lose my place. Water turns pearly. Fire dies down and doesn't destroy. In your presence, I no longer want what I thought I wanted. All those pretty things. And inside your embrace, inside your embrace, inside your embrace, the ancient scriptures seem like rusty mirrors. And the poem ends with, come to the orchard in spring. There is light and wine and sweet hearts in the pomegranate flowers. If you do not come, these light, wine, sweet hearts, if you do not come, these do not matter. If you do come, these do not matter. Thank you so much for being with us today. Blessings, and God willing, we'll see you next month.